Ford says, Russ Joy, the Flyers will never fire Torts. Next day, the Flyers fire Torts. Yeah, so I'm going to have to explain this to Ford because Ford, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. If you had told anybody in the Flyers organization last week or last month or last year that they would fire John Tortorella, they all would have given you the exact same response. No way. If we had talked to anybody, because, believe it or not, talk to people in the Flyers organization, because, down there for 41 home games a year, happen to have good relationships with people in the Flyers organization. 2 weeks ago, the wide belief was that with Torts coming up on the lame duck season in year 4, there was a better than zero chance that he would want to step away from the bench and potentially move up into an advisory role. This has been talked about for 2 years. There was a question of whether or not they could extend him another year so that he wouldn't go into a lame duck season next year. Something very clearly changed. So when I said on Wednesday's show, they're not going to fire Torts, and I tried to kind of show him a little bit of a generous interpretation of, I don't want to learn how to coach a team like this, it was largely informed by the fact that for over 2 years, the conversation has been around him staying with the organization long-term as an advisor. But I will point out the fact something clearly fucking happened in the last few days that fundamentally changed that we went from multiple people saying he's going to stay here long-term as an advisor to he is fired. Fired. So let me reiterate this for Ford. Shit changes. And it changed fast. And I would just clearly point you to Danny Briere's press availability at 5 o'clock yesterday at Wells Fargo Center, which you probably didn't watch or pay attention to. In it, he said that there have been things over the last 2 years that have maybe contributed to the decision to fire John Tortorella. But they had worked through them. But over the last couple of days, certainly, things rapidly changed. And that the comments after the game a couple nights ago might not have been the only reason. They certainly had an impact on the decision to fire John Tortorella, not to allow him to run out the string of the last 9 games, not allowing him to resign with dignity or with his tail tucked between his legs. Fired! Why did that happen? Because something very clearly changed. I don't know, Ford. Sometimes this kind of thing happens. There are happy marriages out there that are happy marriages until one day they're not because something changes within a day or two. And then that marriage blows up. Shit happens all the time. I watched a lot of episodes of The Maury Show and Jerry Springer as a kid when home on sick days. Shit can change real fast. So, no, this isn't like, Russ is a fucking idiot. No, something very clearly changed, and Danny Briere admitted it at the press conference. So again, shit changes. Nothing you could do about it. Now, I will tell you, this is a very weird situation that the Flyers find themselves in. Because Torts has been a very big part of this. Dan Hilferty once called him the spiritual leader of the team. Again, you don't go from that to fired within a few days off of nothing. Something changed. Something happened. Those post-game comments a few nights ago, which we played on the show on Wednesday, where he said he's not interested in learning how to coach a team like this at this point, kind of given like where the season is. I don't know if that was him misspeaking, but it sent off a lot of alarms. It sent up a lot of flags, and it was not interpreted well. The amount of people that were willing to show John Tortorella grace after those comments were few and far between. I compare this to death by 1,000 cuts. Torts is that guy. Torts will do things, say things that will piss you off, will rub you the wrong way. But then you go, he's still a very good coach. He's still able to get the most out of this team. They believed in the culture that was getting instilled, so they dealt with it. They dealt with the warts. I am going to compare this to like a relationship. They were willing to deal with some of the red flags because they believed that they were going to be able to find success at the end of it. And it didn't happen. Because eventually you get worn down until nothing is left. And that's exactly where the Flyers found themselves. So the other night, this is the interesting thing. Danny Briere at the 5 o'clock media availability on Thursday said something to the effect of the players didn't have the direct input into what happened. The players aren't responsible for John Tortorella getting fired, but they know what the temperature of the room is. They know what happens around that locker room, that they don't have to call in Sean Couturier or Travis Konechny or other leaders on the team and say, hey guys, how are we feeling? They know. They have a very good feeling for how the locker room feels, right? Those comments the other night didn't go over well. I did talk to a few people from around the Flyers last night. Not one of them was willing to show grace. Not one of them was willing to say, oh yeah, that's just Torts being Torts. Now, I would not be surprised. I have not confirmed this one. I did not get confirmation on this. I'm going to go off of past precedent, okay? There was an incident that happened around this time last year where Felix Sandstrom played really poorly. And I mean really, really poorly, okay? And the Flyers lost a game. And it was in the midst of them being somewhat within playoff contention. And Sandstrom at that point was the third goalie. Because it was Ersson. I think Fedotov was over at that point. Maybe not. Or it was when it was Ersson and Cal Peterson. Sandstrom was the third goalie. And we all knew Sandstrom wasn't an NHL goalie. They get to the post-game presser. And Tortorella gets asked about Sandstrom and about his play and about, the play in net and everything. And Tortorella essentially I'm very much paraphrasing. It was a year ago. But the quote was essentially like, what do you expect? Play like that in goal, like that's going to happen. And I looked at it and a bunch of other people looked at it and said, that was kind of dickish. Like there's no expectation that Felix Sandstrom could come in and win you a game. He's the third goalie. He's like being forced into a position that he's really not ready for and that he might never be ready for. And then like a day later, 2 days later, Tortorella came out and publicly addressed it and essentially like offered a retraction and said that like he was too hard on it and that it probably put a little bit too much onto Sandstrom. In a way, he like publicly apologized. I don't necessarily think that John Tortorella like had some kind of like introspective look at his comments and went out and did that. Something makes me think that like there was at least one person within the organization that was like, yeah, that probably was uncalled for. Like that, you can say what you want post-game, but that really isn't great. And that maybe that influenced his decision to go out and kind of offer a retraction. Would I be surprised if somebody from the Flyers organization, after hearing Torts' comments the other night, went up to him afterwards and said, yo, that shit doesn't fly? No. I don't know what you meant, but it sure sounded like you said, I don't want to learn how to coach this group at this point in the season. And like, it kind of sounds like you gave up on your players. Whether you wanted it to or not, that's going to be the interpretation. And maybe somebody in the organization said, you really are going to have to address this. We're not letting this one go. You probably have to go and say something to the media tomorrow or maybe ahead of Thursday's game. You really should clarify. And maybe Torts said no. Again, I'm going off of past precedent with Felix Sandstrom. Is it possible?